Well, thank you, Brett. Thank you, everyone at Radley Eldar, for inviting me to be at this increasingly prestigious annual event. Those of us who are involved with annual reports know that they present new challenges every year, whether that's new regulations, revolving best practice, or just new CEOs. And it's gratifying to have that effort recognised. I just hope that I'm not setting myself up for a spectacular fall from grace this afternoon. So I'm getting my excuses in first by saying that, first of all, I'm obviously just one member of a very large team. And whilst it's an annual report, it's also a 20F, so it's going to be useless. So, without more ado, in exploring why that recognition might have come about, I just wanted to examine perhaps how AstraZeneca has changed over the last 10 years, what our approach to reporting has been, and then some of the lessons that we have learned along the way. So before Pfizer approached us last year, we were probably the pharmaceutical company in the UK that you hadn't heard of. That has changed. We're now very much a science-led company focused on researching, developing and commercialising patent-protected medicines in three major areas of healthcare: cardiovascular and metabolic diseases, respiratory, inflammation and autoimmunity, and oncology. Our purpose, as up on the right there, is to push the boundaries of science to deliver life-changing medicines. And that was very much a purpose driven by the new CEO. So it reflects the sort of organisation we are and drives what we do. And a recent example of that was a drug that we'd abandoned work on 3 years ago because it seemed to be ineffective. We resumed work on it because the scientists were convinced that there was a population of patients that it would benefit, and that was approved in the US and in the EU just before Christmas. So that's an example of what we mean by that. We're a pharmaceutical business, but we're very much a global business. 40% of our sales are in the US, but China is now our second market, and we have R&D and manufacturing facilities there. And as a business, we aim to be collaborative in the way we work. We want to be open and inclusive, and that's reflected in the fact that we've got more than 850 partnerships worldwide. So how have we stacked up over the last 10 years? If you look on here, you can see the red line represents the share price, and the AstraZeneca gold line represents the turnover. And you can see that we've got a series of events. Sir Tom McKillop, who was our CEO before becoming chairman of Royal Bank of Scotland, left in 2006. David Brenner took over. In 2007, we acquired a biologics and vaccines company, widely regarded as spending far too much on it, as you can see from the share price. That is, it's fair to say that company is now seen as our saviour. Lehman's filed for bankruptcy in 2008. Our new chief executive joined in October 2012 and really spurred on the company afresh. He gave us a focused purpose, a coherent and compelling narrative, and you can see how that's reflected in the share price going up, even as predicted, with patent medicines coming off patent. The revenues have been falling. And the Pfizer approach in April last year immediately sort of gave a turbocharge to that share price movement. So how has our annual report reflected us as a company? Actually, ultimately, we see it as a legal document. I think in part that's because it's a 20F, but in part it's also because it's a very litigious business. It's a very litigious sector over patents, patent protection, challenging patents. But that said, we could produce it as a completely vanilla document, but we do regard it as being quite a significant communications opportunity. We don't produce that many communications corporately, so this is a good opportunity to do so. But more importantly, it's almost a unique opportunity to present the whole of the business. We can present the business model and the strategy, the financial and non-financial elements and performance, our operations and the resources we apply to deliver those operations, our ethics and our governance. And increasingly, it's a fixed point in a virtual and moving world, and provides a rock for a lot of other communications. The number of times that I've been, said, what does it say in the annual report? If I got some money every time someone said that, I wouldn't be doing this probably. So that said, how do we implement our approach to reporting? Well, perhaps almost uniquely, we appoint a lawyer each year to lead the project, which has its features. The communications and best practice support comes from corporate affairs, and you're seeing that input now. The document's owned by the company secretary, it's sponsored by the general counsel. We have a steering group from across the organisation, and we've got a network now of over 100 contributors, which we need to manage. So I suppose two things I learned from that. First of all, it doesn't really matter who owns the annual report, as long as those parts of the organisation, investor relations, company secretary's office, finance, and corporate affairs, keep in touch, and there are good channels of communication between them. And actually, with more than 100 contributors and a network of advisors and lawyers, it's as much a people project as it is a content project. So given all that, what have we learned along the way? What's our top 10, as it were? As I said, it's very much a people project, and we've got most of the core team, the advisors, but actually having a lawyer on the core team means that you've got an advocate for what you're trying to do, rather than a critic stopping you from what you want to do. A real case of poacher turned gamekeeper, I think, but actually to the benefit of everybody, inside the organisation and outside it. Secondly, allow people to play to their strengths. It really does help if you get the confidence of the CEO and the CFO in what you're doing, and they allow you to get on with it, because that allows you, in turn, to let other people get on with what they do best. And in that, I include design agencies and other helpers. The number of times that I have come across CEOs who think they can design an annual report, it beggars belief, really. They think they have better things to do. And then get the basics right. If you get the basics right, actually the rest of it will usually take most care of itself. From bitter experience, if you don't get the business model and the strategy right, then it's hard to get the rest of the report right. But if you get those right, the structure of your report should actually just fall into place. By all means, look at what other companies are doing. By all means, look at it evolving as best practice. But I try never to forget that we're trying to tell our story, not anybody else's story. It will be a much more authentic document if you do that. In our case, it's helped by the fact that our new CEO has got 3 very clear strategic priorities, which now look very big strategic priorities. They're clear and they're focused, and importantly, in being a great place to work, whilst that may not be a core message for our investor community, it's a really important message within the organisation, and also it allows us to talk about sustainability as part of the way we do business and as part of our strategy, which is important, increasingly important, and brings me on to integrated reporting. Much has changed over the 10 years that we're looking here. 2005, 2006, AstraZeneca was producing separate corporate responsibility reports, 40 pages long. We stopped doing that. 2007, we started embedding. I think embedding is probably a better word than integrating corporate responsibility content into our annual report. We had a member of the board, Dame Nancy Rothwell, distinguished scientist, leading our sustainability effort. We then called it responsible business. And so we embedded that content in the annual report, and then we did an annual update of what was on our corporate website. To the extent that we're moving towards integrated reporting, as I said, that's been allowed by the fact that our strategy includes those sustainability themes as part of what we're trying to do. Although if I were to talk to anyone in the business about integrated reporting, I think they're probably giving me a very strange look. And I think there is a disjunct between what the community calls integrated reporting and integrated thinking and what the business does. Next, 6, be prepared for shocks. Clarity over process and timetable enables you to overcome shocks much better. The CEO might have a change of heart about his photograph or about the strategy. There may be late-breaking news, or you may have a corporate reorganisation announced a week before you're signing off. If you're clear about your process and your timetable, these sorts of things become much easier to deal with. And as we all know, they always happen. I pleaded the 20th Amendment when I started this talk, but I really do think it's a poor excuse for not trying. I try and encourage the team to challenge our American lawyers each year. And after 6 years, we've finally got permission to go ahead and look at our risk reporting. It just shows you have to, if at first you don't succeed, you really do have to try again. And in the same way as we want to challenge over 20F material, it's important to try and improve each year. if, like me, you probably see improvements you want to make to the annual report before you press the print button on this year's annual report. And I think it's another feature of the fact of having a new set of eyes through a lawyer each year. We're able to refresh our approach to each document. That said, silk purses do come extra. Annual reports can only do so much. They can burnish things, but they can't fix broken companies. And they are also an output, not an input. So if regulators really do want us to think and act in an integrated way, I'm not sure that the right place to start is necessarily with an annual report. It really should be about how businesses are being managed, and rather than how we report on those businesses. And my final point is it really is possible to have too many hyphens in an annual report. We really do need to recognise the law of diminishing returns in proofreading. Every time the document proofreads, it comes back with more hyphens, and everything becomes hyphenated. And I think you need to recognise there is a time when you just have to stop. So, in summary, my final 3 points. P to the power of 7, which is that proper planning and preparation prevent pathetically, other P words are available, poor performance. If you don't get those in place, then you're on to a loser from the start. Secondly, yes, it's true that some elements of the annual report drive us all to distraction, but we really do need to think we can do better each year, otherwise we should probably give up and go home. And finally, it's not about arrogance, but it's about having the self-confidence to use the annual report to tell a company's story as best as we can. So, thank you for listening. I shall now look forward to understanding how it's done properly.